started drawing flowers in the vase on a checked tablecloth which I just brought back from Paris. And then the drawing started growing, including everything which just happened to be on the kitchen table at the time. It just got bigger and bigger. I'm mainly a person that draws in coloured pencil most of the time. Therefore, lithography for me is an extension of the normal way that I draw, using lithographic chalks and inks from drawings. I always draw quite an elaborate drawing to start with because as the lithograph is going to be in so many colours, I need to get a key line to do the overprinting of each colour, and so you need quite an elaborate sketch before you do the lithograph. I first became interested in lithographs in seeing books like this, with lovely lithographs by John Nash in them. They're published by the Kirwan Press. And a little later, I was given the opportunity to produce a little book of my own at the Kirwan, which is this, a little souvenir of North London suburbia called Metroland, with verse by the Poet Laureate. It's quite a small book, and there are rather a lot of colours in them. And then last year, I did another album of 16 London power stations called Temples of Power, with rather few colours in them. Lithography was discovered in the late 18th century. Daumier was one of a group of artists who used it commercially in France in the 19th century. He used it for his political caricatures in magazines. It was mainly a commercial process. Toulouse-Lautrec used it in a rather different way for his bold posters with large areas of flat colour. This century, people like Barnett Friedman in England have used it for book illustration in the 30s. And now there's been a great revival of interest in it, and more artists are using it to make prints. When you go to the Kirwan Press, you work with the technicians. You first see Stanley Jones and talk over the matters with him. But at each stage of the process, you're using a technician to prepare a plate, process a plate, and then eventually proof a plate. And each one of those stages involves both you and them working together. The outline of the drawing is transferred onto a plate in dye, which doesn't print. Then you start filling in all the colours. We decided to do the print in 6 colours. You need a new plate for each colour. And now I'm drawing the first plate, which would be the red colour, but I start drawing it in black grease, a special crayon or special ink, which has got some black in it so you can see what you're doing, but this is really grease. Lithography is based on the principle that grease and water don't mix. And so an image can be drawn onto a plate using a greasy substance. The plate is then damped and rolled up with coloured ink, which sticks to the places that you've drawn, but the water on the plate repels the greasy printing ink. You can gum out areas to protect the plate, places you don't want to print. And now I'm going to use pen and ink, which gives a hard ink line. On the bowl, I'm going to try a new spatter effect, which Stanley is going to help me with. The first thing he does is dust the plate with chalk, which simply dries the image.
The kind of experience I particularly offer the artist is to do with the use of lithographic materials, which are specially comprised of grease and black pigment. They're not like normal drawing process materials and need a considerable amount of advice and experience in their use.
We've gummed out the entire plate to protect it, and we're going to spatter ink on.
Once they've all been completed, the plates are then handed over to Roy, whose job it is to process the image. After French chalk has been applied to the drawing, an application is given to the plate of gum arabic. As it's applied with a sponge, it does form a stencil layer around the drawing. The gum arabic is the agent which chemically forms the water receptive layer. Terps and asphaltum are applied to the plate surface in order to dissolve the black. The drawing remains on the plate in the form of an ink-receptive, greasy shadow. Roy then takes a sponge dipped in clean water and clears the residual gum arabic and asphaltum from the plate surface, leaving it receptive for the next stage. The plate is rolled up with a special storage black which protects the artist's drawing, and also a gum arabic layer is applied to the plate to protect the whole image prior to proofing. Apart from the effect of the atmosphere and dust, Glynn's image has to withstand printing for several hundreds of copies.
Yeah, that looks fine. Okay. Once all the plates have been processed, they're individually taken over to the proofing press. They're inked up in their own colour, and then one by one they're printed on top of each other. Right, John, it's the usual blue. The first colour we've decided to print is quite a strong French blue. We've chosen to do this first because it's the strongest colour which will be modified by overprinting the other colours on it. As the colours are mixed, John dabs a sample onto a white card so we can see how the colours will print. The plate is made ready to receive the ink by removing the gum arabic with water and taking out the black pigment with terps. It's given a final wipe with water. You have to keep the plate damp the whole time to protect the undrawn surfaces so that the printing ink only goes into the greasy areas. Now this is an offset press, which means the image was first printed onto a blanket, the rubber covering round the roller, which reverses the image. The roller then prints the image onto paper, so the image prints the right way round. The coloured lithograph is made up by several repeat processes of printing individual colours, and because of the translucent nature of printing inks, one ink on top of another ink might make a third colour, and this is what's known as overprinting. And a lot of the lithography is based on this overprinting technique. I'm pleased with it. It's got that smooth and clarified lithographic quality which I like, and although it's very different from the drawing I was doing, it's exactly the quality I wanted whilst I was doing the drawing.
I consider myself primarily as a painter. I spend most of the year painting and perhaps 1 or 2 prints a year. The method I use in the prints is very similar to the painting method. I spray almost totally in the paintings through the masks. The source of the imagery is the city, and I suppose I treat it much the same way as painters, printmakers in the past have treated landscape. I think of it as an urban landscape. The first prints and paintings were works from cars. That is, not cars in themselves and not even their reflections. They are far more abstract and to do with colour change and slight movements on reflective surfaces. But within a space of time, I became more interested in the city reflection, the buildings. And gradually, in this sense, these got out of hand. They became so distorted that a great change for me, but quite an obvious one, I moved straight to the buildings. And within the buildings I have the qualities, formal, colour, that I want in the paintings and in the prints. There's something impressive about the contemporary architecture. A little of it I like, a lot I don't think in itself it's particularly interesting. But as an environment to walk through, it is very impressive, and it is part of our contemporary society. I like the strength, the boldness, the rigidity of a structure that a building might offer, does offer. But along with this, I want some sort of freedom within the image itself, which happens through the reflections out of another building. The building becomes broken, becomes very much a flowing, rippling form, or reflection of the sky, or an interior. I suppose there is something in the buildings when one walks around a city and one raises one's eyes from street level. These buildings are very impressive, very dominant, and they contain masses of people. And yet when I look at them, often they are empty-looking buildings with all this activity going on within. This lithograph is, in point of fact, the base of a building, but it has the strength and power and character that I find quite appealing. It's derived from both a painting and a photograph.
We'll probably do the 7.
Alan Cox, the printer, and I met with the photograph of the painting, and we decided upon the number of colours, which means the number of plates that we would use for the print. And we decided to start with that we'd try to do the lithograph within 7 plates. What I'll do now is to draw. These drawings will become the masks through which I spray onto the plate. I'll be cutting out the whole section and then parts of this section. Each of them, in a sense, represents a tone or a colour through which I'll spray onto the plate. I'll start with the most basic element, the strongest structure of the building, in this case, the centre structure. I'm now going to spray through this first mask onto a second sheet, which will give me a base against which to draw for the second mask. I use a paint to spray through. Spraying is far clearer and more precise than using a pencil. Having got this on the paper, I will then draw as I did in the first one. Cut this out and work through again until I have a series of masks through which I can work onto the plates. I have 9 masks which represent virtually all the formal drawing. To reach this stage, I've taken 2.5, 3 days. So now I'm ready to start the first plate, which will be the white colour. It's not a general plate at all. In fact, there is only one very important area where it comes through quite solidly, and that's the area I'll spray first. I'm using a lithographic ink, which I have to put through an old stocking to take out all the impurities. Then in the spray gun, I will spray much the same as I would on a painting, except of course that I'm working tonally, so the darkest areas will be the intense areas of colour on the actual plate. This is the white finished. Now I collect the second mask. There's an area of cream on this, which I'll put a base of white under. The masks are general. There's no one mask for a colour. You can use 7 or 8, 12 masks on one plate. The easier plates probably are the final ones, where you can't put too much dark down. You wipe out everything that's gone before. I've worked on 7 plates, and this covers the whole range of colours that I think I'll probably need, from a white plate through to a very dark and then to a final green wash. Having now completed the plates, I will take them across to the printer, Alan Cox.
This is the first plate, right?
Alan will process the plates, which probably takes a few days. The next stage is the proofing, and I'd like to be there to see the image grow. Physically, I'm doing nothing. I might occasionally dab my hand in the ink, but Alan is all the time mixing and rolling. I think the most important thing is to keep on looking and considering whether new plates might be needed, whether too much is on certain plates, and knocking out the sort of colour and the sort of contrast that ultimately I'll be aiming for.
That's not far off.
Yes, it's probably a little dark, but I think we can probably go darker.
Okay.
Okay, shall we try it?
Yeah, let's try it. Good. The paper has been marked. There are corresponding marks on the plate which we line up to. A backing sheet, then. 6.
Having worked with Alan before, he has an idea of the sort of colour range I'll probably be working through, and of the imagery, and ultimately of what, to a certain extent, I'm wanting from the image. So, in some ways, it is, and it has to be, I think, a joint production. I'm very dependent upon the printer and his ability to comprehend what I'm aiming for.
That's not too bad, is it?
No, it's fine.
First one off.
Relatively speaking, it's very difficult to visualize the total print before you actually get the first 7 plates down on the paper. It becomes quite exciting when 3 or 4 plates are down and you begin getting the contrasts in the colors and the image really begins formalizing itself.
Well, that's the 7th printing. See how it looks. What do you think?
It's quite good. There are 2 things, I suppose. One, the green will increase with more printing.
Yeah.
And secondly, I suppose I'm a bit disturbed by the fact that the black hasn't come through quite as strongly.
Yeah, you are losing quite a lot up there.
Well, do you think the answer is a new plate?
Well, I think a good idea if you do want it, and we'll try it. Voila. That's the new black one.
Yeah, it's much better. Gives a lot more space and depth, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot more depth in there.
However, there are 2 areas I'd like to change it. One is to get a much more solid brown.
Yeah.
And secondly, to isolate these areas from that by making them much creamier, which would probably mean 2 more plates.
It would make it more clarity, wouldn't it? To bring out these areas. Yeah. See what it looks like. Wunderbar. That looks... Well, that's your print, Bran. I think it looks all right. How about you?
I think it's really good. Very pleased.
Good.